shadow moves across the silver beach, not from the moon above, but from something rising in the water below. Tiny silhouettes emerge from the dunes, baby sea turtles, no bigger than a palm, their shells still soft as leather. They shuffle towards the surf with ancient instinct. Each flipper stroke a desperate, fragile victory. Each inch a miracle for a heartbeat. The night feels sacred. Then the silence shatters. Splash! The lagoon erupts. Water sprays into the air as a massive shape rises. Scales glinting like wet stone. Teeth bared, the crocodile. 12 feet of muscle and hunger. Jaw snapping just inches from the first hatchling, who scrambles backward, flippers flailing helplessly in the sand. 30 yards away, the fishermen freeze, nets forgotten, hearts hammering. Predators are nothing new here, but this one's different. Ancient, primordial. Its yellow eyes sweep the beach like searchlights, counting every vulnerable hatchling. One man steps forward, then stops. His hands shake. He knows what's coming, and that almost nothing they do can stop it. The crocodile lunges again, faster this time. Its jaws close on empty sand, but the tremor shakes the shore. One strike, and the journey could end before it even began. But the night isn't finished, because on this beach, under this moon, someone will make a choice, and the ocean will remember. When survival hangs in the balance, is courage born from strength or compassion? Let us know what you believe and join us for more stories of resilience. The night began in peace. Manuel, Carlos, and old Diego sat on the warm sand, working tangled nets by lamplight. The sea whispered against the shore, and beyond the dunes, a guitar carried faint village melodies. Every full moon, they returned to this hidden cove to mend nets, share stories, and remember who they were before the years pressed in. Carlos chuckled, his grin flashing in the lantern's glow. Remember when we were kids? He nodded towards the dunes. We'd stay up all night waiting for the turtle races. That's what they called it back then. The mass migration of baby sea turtles scrambling towards the ocean. A miracle that arrived like clockwork every September, when the moon was brightest and the tides were right. Diego's eyes softened into memory. At 73, he had seen more turtle seasons than anyone in their village. His voice, low and gravelly, carried the weight of truth. My grandfather used to say, "Only one in 1,000 hatchlings makes it to adulthood," he murmured. "From the moment they break their shells, the world is against them." The words settled over the men like mist. 1 in 1,000, a cruel number, and yet, every year, the hatchling still crawled. Manuel, just 35, had been coming here since he was a boy. Now, his own children counted down the days until turtle season, begging him to bring them so they could see courage dressed in shells the size of their palms. He smiled faintly. It never gets old, does it? Watching something so small fight hard to live. The three men worked in silence for a while, their lantern light flickering against the nets. Around them lay decades of memory. Storms that split boats apart, waves that swallowed men whole. Yet, also beauty. Dolphins dancing in the surf, whales breaching out at sunset, and always the tiny warriors racing for the sea. Then it came, not the gentle lap of waves, not the hush of tide, but a sound jagged and wrong. Splash! The man froze. heads snapping towards the dark water. The net slid from their hands as the peaceful night fractured, fragile as glass. Something had come ashore, and none of them yet knew it would demand more of them than any storm ever had. The crocodile moved with terrifying intelligence. It wasn't just thrashing blindly or lunging in bursts of hunger. No, this one knew exactly what it was doing, hauling its body halfway onto the sand. It cut off the hatchlings from their only escape route, positioning itself between them and the sea like a gatekeeper of death. Water poured from its armored hide, rivulets streaming off the ridges of its scales until it gleamed under the fisherman's lantern like wet iron. Its massive tail swept across the beach in a violent arc, scattering baby turtles as easily as a gust of wind scatters leaves. Manuel's heart hammered against his ribs. He had seen crocodiles before. Everyone who lived along the shores had, but never one like this. Never one this size, this calculated, this deliberate. This wasn't hunger. This was a strategy. A predator had lived long enough to know the patterns, to anticipate the chaos of turtle season and claim it for itself. Jesus Christ, Carlos whispered, his voice a ragged thread. Look at the size of that thing. But Diego didn't answer. The old man's weathered fists had clenched into trembling knots. His eyes had watched generations of turtle seasons, storms, and shipwrecks, and were fixed on the carnage unfolding at their feet. In 73 years, he had never seen anything like this. The hatchlings were chaos embodied. Some scattered towards the dunes, as if the sand could protect him. Others froze, instincts tangled in fear. A few still pushed doggedly towards the water, their tiny flippers throwing sand like sparks, blind to the monster waiting for them. The crocodile's massive head swiveled with unnerving precision, its eyes, yellow and ancient, locked on movement. Then it lunged. The sound shattered the night. Jaws slammed shut with crack that echoed like gunfire across the cove. Sand burst upward in a spray, and when it cleared, the tiny turtle was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Only the rhythmic hush of waves remained, as if the ocean itself had turned its back. Manuel realized he wasn't breathing. He forced air into his lungs just as the predator opened its mouth again. And something impossible tumbled out. The hatchling, stunned, motionless but alive. Its soft shell had slipped free, too slick and too small to grip between those monstrous teeth. It lay on the wet sand, its fragile body rising and falling with shallow breaths. Manuel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, and for a heartbeat, hope pierced the terror. "We have to do something," he said, the words tearing from his throat. Carlos's head snapped towards him. "Are you out of your mind? That thing could take your arm off without blinking. Hell, it could take your whole body." He stumbled a step back, his lantern swinging wildly. Fear carved deep lines across his face. Manuel knew Carlos wasn't wrong. 3 fishermen with nets and calloused hands against a creature built for killing. It was absurd, but Diego's gaze remained fixed on the beach. His jaw clenched, lips barely moving as memory surfaced like a ghost. "My grandfather used to tell me stories," he murmured. "Back when raiders came for turtle nests, the fishermen protected them. Said, the sea gives back what you put into it. Guard the weak, and the ocean will guard you." The words cut through Manuel like a blade. He could almost hear his own grandfather's voice layered over Diego's. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do when you're terrified but act anyway. Another lunge, another spray of sand, another hatchling gone. But this time, the crocodile wasn't alone. Two shadows slid through the shallows, silent but unmistakable. Their ridged backs broke the surface, gliding with predatory calm. Smaller than the first, but still massive, still lethal, drawn by the commotion. They were closing in on the feast. Manuel's blood iced over. One crocodile was unstoppable. Three? This wasn't hunting anymore. This was slaughter. The hatchlings didn't stand a chance. A wave of dread surged over him as he scanned the sand. Tiny bodies flailed in every direction, flippers cutting frantic tracks into the beach. And then, one caught his eye. Braver, or more desperate than the rest. It pushed forward with astonishing speed. Its flippers churned sand in a frenzied rhythm, propelling it straight towards the water. For a moment, a single dazzling moment, Manuel believed it might make it. Then, the massive crocodile's tail swept across the beach. The hatchling tumbled, flipping end over end until it landed upside down. Its soft belly glistened in the lantern light, pale against the dark sand. Flippers thrashed in the air, a helpless rhythm that looked more like drowning than movement. That image seared itself into Manuel's mind. He knew, no matter what happened tonight, he would never forget it. The crocodile's head lowered, its jaws spread open, teeth flashing like ivory daggers. Time fractured. Manuel could see everything. The reflection of the lantern in the crocodile's eye, the trembling flippers of the overturned hatchling, the dozen others still scattered like forgotten prayers across the sand. "Manuel," Carlos said, his voice breaking, don't even think about it." But Manuel was already thinking about it, already feeling the truth weigh on him like ocean pressing down. This is the moment. Diego's hand tightened on his shoulder. The old man didn't say a word, but his grip said everything. Manuel's grandfather had once told him, "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing in the teeth of it, knowing you could lose everything and stepping forward anyway." Tonight, with the ocean whispering at his back and death glaring at him from the sand, he finally understood. The predator's jaws began to close, and Manuel knew if they did nothing, the massacre would begin. If they acted, they might not survive. But either way, the choice had already been made. "No!" The word rips from Manuel's throat before he even realizes he's moving. It isn't the reason that drives him, or courage. It's instinct, raw and unfiltered. His feet bore the sand, his chest heaves, and his hand seizes the first weapon he can find, a weather-worn oar propped against their fishing gear. The wood is smooth from years of calloused palms, but it feels fragile in his grip compared to the monster waiting ahead. The crocodile's head swings up, yellow eyes burn like lanterns in the moonlight. And for one heartbeat, the predator and a man lock onto each other. One ancient, one fleeting, both unwilling to yield. Manuel's legs feel like water, but they don't stop. He charges to the waterline, heart hammering. He raises the oar high and slams it into the shallows. The crack echoes like a gunshot. A sheer of water explodes upward, drenching him and the reptile alike. For an impossible instant, the crocodile recoils, startled by the defiance. "Get away!" Manuel roars, voice breaking with adrenaline. "Get away!" Behind him, Carlos finds his own courage. He snatches up their oil lantern and hurls it in a wide arc. The glass shudders in the surf, and fire blooms across the water, hissing and dancing. A second crocodile thrashes back, confused by the sudden blaze. But the alpha, the massive beast stalking Manuel, doesn't retreat. It lowers its head, eyes narrowing, and lunges forward with terrifying speed. Its tail slices the water, propelling it like a torpedo. The jaws snap shut just feet from Manuel's legs. The stench of rot fills his nostrils, gagging him. He sees every scar crisscrossing its hide, every jagged tooth glistening. His oar is nothing but a toothpick against this monster. Still he swings. The crocodile clamps down, splintering the oar in its mouth. The shock reverberates up Manuel's arms, numbing them to the shoulders. He stumbles backward, the useless stomp still clutched in his hand. Behind the beast, something small shifts. A hatchling, overturned in the chaos, rights itself. Against all odds, it begins to crawl again. Tiny flippers digging furrows in the wet sand. Manuel's throat tightens. Keep going, he whispers hoarsely, eyes never leaving the predator. Don't stop now. The crocodile surges closer, its bulk sliding up the beach. Now, it isn't just blocking the sea, it's between the men in their village. A wall of muscle and rage. Diego's voice rips through the din. The nets, Carlos! Get the nets! It's a reckless idea, maybe a stupid one, but it's the only one. Carlos sprints to their gear, dragging out the heavy commercial net they use for hauls big enough to break a man's back. Manuel barely hears them. His focus narrows to survival. The crocodile lashes its tail again, sweeping sand into the air. Manuel leaps sideways, landing hard on one knee. Pain shoots up his leg, but he grits his teeth. Then, the twist, sudden, cruel. Instead of pursuing him, the crocodile swings its massive head towards the crawling hatchling, its jaws open, teeth glinting in the firelight. No! Manuel roars again, scrambling to his feet. Every muscle screams, but he lunges forward, placing himself between the predator and the fragile line of turtles. The crocodile lunges, jaw snapping shut so close he feels the suction of air. He shoves the broken oar into its mouth, buying half a second, not more, but enough. Carlos arrives, the net bunched in his fists. Together, he and Diego rush forward, spreading the heavy mesh wide. The beast thrashes, sensing the trap, its tail sending shockwaves through the surf. And for one terrifying moment, Manuel thinks they'll all be dragged under. And then, miracle. The first baby turtle reaches the sea. A small wave curls over it, and it vanishes into the dark expanse, carried by the currents older than memory. Manuel's chest heaves, his arms shake. He knows 23 more will still wait for their chance, and the crocodile isn't finished. But for that one hatchling, life has begun. And Manuel has decided he won't stop until the rest follow. The net stretched out between Carlos and Diego, rough rope cutting into their callous palms. In the moonlight, it looked like a wall, a fragile line of defense drawn across the sand. But the crocodile wasn't fooled. The alpha circled just beyond reach, its hulking body cutting arcs through the shallow water. Yellow eyes gleamed like lanterns, locked on the three men. Every slow turn was deliberate, patient. This was no reckless hunter. It had lived long enough to grow monstrous, long enough to learn caution. "It's waiting for us to slip," Diego murmured, voice low, as if loud words might trigger the beast. At 73, he'd seen storms crack boats like kindling, sharks shadow schools of tuna, whales breach with power that shook the sea. But he'd never seen ice like this, cold, calculating, unafraid. Manuel's chest heaved. His hands were raw, blood slick from gripping the splintered oar that the monster had torn apart minutes ago. The broken shaft floated nearby, useless. He looked at it and felt a wave of despair. They had brought tools for fishing, not weapons for war. Around them, the beach writhed with movement, the hatchlings, tiny warriors born under the same moon that now silvered the waves, were crawling again. Instinct called them forward. Each flipper stroke driven by millions of years of survival etched into their blood. They didn't know about the danger. They only knew the pull of the ocean. "We can't hold this line," Carlos panted. His arms trembled under the weight of the net. He kept glancing at the water, where ripples betrayed the movement of more predators. "That thing could wait us out all night." As if in answer, two small crocodiles slid closer, their bodies cutting silently through the water. Patient as shadows, they began to flank the exhausted men. A siege, tightening with every passing second. Diego's eyes narrowed. Something stirred in memory. His grandfather's voice, gravelly with age, telling tales around a lantern. Not just about guarding the turtle nest, but how. "The light," he whispered, then louder. "They hate the light. Carlos, your tackle box, do you still have the flare?" Carlos' head snapped up. Every fisherman carried them, emergency flares bright enough to summon help miles at sea. His gaze darted to their gear stacked by the dunes. For a heartbeat, he froze, torn between fight and flight. Then, he dropped the net's edge and sprinted. The alpha struck instantly, sensing weakness in the wall. Water exploded as it lunged, 12 feet of armored muscle crashing forward. Manuel and Diego yanked the net aside just in time, throwing themselves into the sand as the beast's head slammed down where they stood. The nets tangled around its front legs. For one glorious second, Manuel dared to hope. He pulled with all his strength, Diego anchoring the other end. The crocodile thrashes in fury, but hope lasted only a breath. The predator rolled, a violent spinning death roll that shredded the nets into ribbons. The rope snapped, whipping across Manuel's chest and burning his skin. He stumbled backward, gasping, as the monster righted itself with terrifying ease. But the struggle bought time. In those few seconds, 3 hatchlings scuttled past, flippers carving frantic trails through the sand. Manuel watched them vanish into the foam, heartsick with how fragile and brave they were. Carlos came pounding back, flare clutched in his fist, eyes wild. "Cover your eyes," he shouted, yanking the cord. The beach erupted in a scarlet fire. The flare hissed, burning like fragment of the sun, painting the world in searing red. Water turned to molten glass. Shadows stretched long and jagged across the dunes. All 3 crocodiles recoiled, prehistoric instincts overwhelmed. They hissed, jaws snapping at the sudden brilliance, tails lashing spray. For the first time, the balance shifted. But in that light, Manuel saw something that made his blood run cold. A hatchling, smaller than the rest, was crawling the wrong way, disoriented by the chaos. It was heading inland, towards the dunes where death waited in silence. "No!" The word barely left his throat. He ran, legs burning, sand spraying behind him. He didn't hear Carlos screaming his name. He didn't hear Diego cursing. He only saw the tiny turtle, flippers dragging, alone. He scooped it up just as the alpha surged forward, blinded but enraged. The massive jaw snapped shut inches from Manuel's heels as he threw himself sideways. The ground shook with the impact, and the monster's hot breath washed over his neck. Manuel rolled, clutching the hatchling to his chest. The flare's crimson glow reflected in its black eyes. Two pinpricks of life cradled against his pounding heart. He staggered to his feet, running towards the surf as the crocodile heaved after him, its body grinding over sand. "Come on," he begged, breath ragged. "Just a little more." The waves whispered only feet away. Manuel knelt, lowering the hatchling into the wash. "Go," he whispered, voice breaking. "Find your family." The tiny turtle hesitated, staring up as if it understood. Then a wave swept over, and it vanished into the dark, joining the current older than time itself. Manuel collapsed to his knees, chest heaving. Behind him, Diego's voice cracked through the roar. "Look!" He turned. The beach was empty. The chaos, the sacrifice, the firelight, all of it had bought enough time. 22 tiny trails carved the sand, weaving from nest to sea. Against all odds, the hatchlings had made it. The three men stood together, trembling, watching the water swallow the last flipper strokes. In the deeper surf, the crocodiles lingered, circling, their meal lost. The flare hissed lower, its glow dying to embers. Slowly, one by one, the predators sank beneath the waves and disappeared into the dark. The beach fell silent. Only the hiss of the tide remained, washing away the trails of the brave. The flare hissed out, leaving the men under the moon's silvery glow. The sand bore the chaos, claw marks, torn net fragments, broken shells. But the danger had passed. Only the steady wash of the ocean remained. Manuel sank to the sand, hands trembling as adrenaline faded. Carlos collapsed beside him, clutching the shredded net like a trophy. At the water's edge, Diego stood silent, watching the faint hatchling tracks vanish into the Pacific. "Did we just—" Manuel began, his voice hoarse from shouting, from fear. "Fight off 3 crocodiles for baby turtles?" Carlos finished, his laugh breaking into disbelief. Yeah, we did." The absurdity of it made them all chuckle, though the sound was fragile, half born of exhaustion. For a heartbeat, they were children again, sneaking out at night, daring each other to impossible risks. Except tonight, their foolishness had teeth, claws, and consequences. Diego's voice carried low over the surf. 23, he said. I counted. 23 made it. In most years on calmer nights, they were lucky if half as many survived the trek from nest to sea. Tonight, against predators older than memory, nearly every hatchling had made it. That number felt sacred. Diego knelt, fingers brushing the tiny tracks imprinted in the damp sand. My grandfather always said, if you guard the weak, the sea will guard you. Manuel looked at him, the words cutting deeper than expected. His mind drifted to his own children, asleep in their small beds back in the village. Tomorrow, he would tell them the story. The night their father and his friends refused to let predators win. He imagined their wide eyes, the way they would hold their breaths when he spoke of claws and teeth, and how, by the end, they might stand a little taller, proud of the courage carried in their family's name. He bent and picked up a broken shard of shell, its edges worn smooth by the tide. Something so fragile, yet it had shielded alive until the moment it could break free. A miracle disguised as weakness. They won't remember us, Carlos said quietly, nodding to the dark waters where the hatchlings had vanished. By morning, they'll be miles away, carried by the currents. We're just gone from their story. That's not the point, Manuel answered, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. We'll remember them, and maybe that's enough. For a long while, they said nothing. The moonlit ocean stretched vast and eternal, swallowing the tiny lives they'd vowed to protect. Most hatchlings would survive the year, and fewer would ever return. Yet tonight, three ordinary men had stood between predator and prey, giving fragile life a fighting chance. The horizon began to soften with a faint blush of dawn. Diego turned from the sea, his face lined with exhaustion, but lit with something steadier. He clapped both men on the shoulder. Come, Maria will have coffee waiting, and I think we've earned the telling of this one. They gathered what little remained of their equipment and began to walk back to the village. Each step pressed into the sand, alongside the crisscrossing maze of hatchling tracks. A map of defiance, a record of survival. Manuel paused once more to look at the water. Under the calm surface, somewhere unseen, 23 miracles swam towards their destiny. Courage, he thought, wasn't always a roar or a battle cry. Sometimes, it was standing firm in the dark, between a predator and a life too small to stand alone. And on this night, that was enough. Everyday heroes are all around us.